till the one with the biggest rack wins. Again, maybe like humans, I don't know. And then that one who wins has, in this case, about 30 to 40 cows. And they kind of hang around my backyard and eat all the flowers we've been planting all summer. And I watch them. And this guy, like the lion, is totally obsessed with sex. He's got 40 cows to take care of. And for about 2 weeks, that's what he does. And I can be out on my front steps videoing him, and he doesn't care. Okay, so Bloodhound Gang tells me, you and me, baby, we're nothing but mammals, so let's do it like they do it on the Discovery Channel. Well, I look at how they do it, and I find that it's not really how most humans I know do it. Do you remember the scene when, in A Beautiful Mind, where the Nobel Prize-winning mathematician goes up to the girl in the bar, the woman in the bar, and says, you know, I never was good at this social stuff, so why don't we just skip the small talk and get to the place where we exchange bodily fluids? Like the mammals do it, right? Slap right on the side of his face. Worst pickup line ever in movies. And we don't, you know, most of us don't like doing it in broad daylight with people videotaping us. Now, there are a few perverts out there, but most of us don't like that. Most of us don't like doing it with 40 people at once. Most people I know. And most people think about it at other times of the year than the third week of September. Or twice a year in the case of lions. And in fact, the more you study human sexuality, the more what stands out is how different it is from mammalian sexuality. Mammalian sexuality is all about creating new hippos, new lions, new elk. Human sexuality is about creating intimacy, creating relationship. And the more you study it, the more you realize it's really not how other mammals do it. It's unique. It's different. It touches not just bodies, but souls. And every aspect of human sexuality. Some of these things I can't talk about, but you can read about them in my book. Every aspect of human sexuality underscores that. So when I look at this planet, and when I look at just the evidence it's given us, I think, God may not be so dumb after all. God may understand the humans that He designed, the humans that He created. I called the book I wrote about this called Rumors of Another World. And to me, those are rumors. They're not proofs, but they're rumors. There are times in our lives when we pay attention and wonder, is there something else going on? For me, when I experienced profound beauty, I told you about the ways I did, through romantic love and classical music and the beauties of nature, I start thinking, maybe there's more. Maybe there's more. At hinge moments in life, you will probably sense that. I have a friend in Chicago who is a pastor. He's ordained. And he runs a web service where he will marry you. And so he interviews all these people. They call him up. He always has them come over to his house, a couple. And he'll say, have you ever been to church? No, I don't go to church. Okay. Why did you call a pastor? Well, we just thought, if there's something this important, maybe, I don't know, somehow it might be nice to have God involved. Oh, okay. And then he leads to discussions about that. Our funerals. I was at one just a week ago. A person in downtown Denver committed suicide. Very sad funeral. And so many people stood up one by one and told about what a wonderful person this was. And I kept thinking, if only Bruce had heard these words 5 days ago, he may not have killed himself. Because he didn't think he was a wonderful person. I've never once gone to a funeral where somebody stood up and talked about, oh man, George, he had the greatest 50-inch gas plasma television screen. Oh man, you should have seen George's stereo system. Oh, he drove an Audi A4, 6-speed. They don't talk about that. They talk about how George was generous, George was kind, George was funny. In actual fact, George was kind of a jerk. But at funerals, It's funny, at funerals, at this moment, this hinge moment when life ends, we instinctively want to remember the good things, the lasting things. George spent his entire life trying to accumulate, and he was a jerk in doing it, and yet we couldn't quite come to terms with that. We wanted to believe more about George. We lied, even at his funeral. Those are the rumors that we hear, and they are just rumors. You have to pay attention to them. Our own culture is telling us a lot of other messages very loudly. If you want to know what our culture values, go to any newsstand here in your town, college campus, and just look. I do this regularly. Airport, on the way through, I stop at the newsstand and I look. What can I learn about American 21st century culture from these magazine covers? Well, first thing I learned is we like women taking their clothes off. About half of all the magazine covers I see are women without much on. So we value bodies, and we value men's bodies too. You see athletes. Then you read further. I remember when Michael Jordan retired the second time. He was retired 3 times now. And when he retired the second time, some sports writer figured this up and calculated that Michael Jordan, the next year, for not playing basketball, okay, he's retired, he's got $100 million from Nike, he's got all these endorsements, would earn twice as much money that next year for not playing basketball as all presidents in the history of the United States put together. Now that says something about our society to me. You could probably make a good case that Michael Jordan deserves more than some particular presidents. We won't get into that tonight. But if our society pays Michael Jordan, I like Michael Jordan. I lived in Chicago. I watched him play. I think it's wonderful. But if we value the ability to put a round object into a larger round object more than all of the leaders of our democracy in history, that's a little crazy, I think. And I go and I stand at the checkout lines and I watch the people who buy these magazines. This is the United States. Scientists tell us that 64% of Americans are overweight. And having watched the checkout stands, I agree. That is true. So you see all these overweight, kind of slovenly Americans buying these magazines of these skinny, beautiful people. And you think, isn't this strange that here we have this great value of Jessica Simpson, Jennifer Lopez, and people drool over them, and none of them look. Where are these people? I've never met one. Isn't that strange that we live with this illusion? And the things that are so important, we're told, in this culture, and in some ways don't matter. My wife used to work at a hospice. She was a chaplain at a hospice. In this hospice, you had to be very near death just to get in. In fact, the average person who went to that hospice lived only 10 days before dying. So these are people at the very end of life. And she would come home and tell me about the people she got to know. And sometimes I would go down with her. And some of these people were very famous. They were people who played for the Denver Broncos in 1957. And they would have clippings on the wall of their time in the sun. Or they would be socialites, and again, newspaper clippings. And some of these people were rich, millionaires. And some of these people had no money at all. They were scraped off the street by policemen. No hospital wants them. It would just increase their mortality rate, so they took them to this hospice. It's a charity hospice. And the interesting thing is that all the things that we spend so much of our energy doing, having beautiful bodies, having large bank accounts, none of those things mattered to the people in the hospice. There were no beautiful bodies in that hospice. And the things, the size of your bank account, that millionaire would have given all of his bank account if he wasn't in that hospice and he had years left of life. These things that we spend our lives on, Jesus told stories about it. He told about a farmer who built bigger and bigger barns, and at the end, he finally had the barn as big as he wanted, and then he thought, then the next day he died. And Jesus says, what does it profit you if you gain the whole world and lose your soul? Why are we chasing this celebrity culture and this cult of beauty and possessions when these things they don't last? One reason I came back to faith was because of my profession as a journalist. I go around and interview people. Journalists we're leeches. We don't have lives of our own, so we grab onto somebody who does have a life. And the people who impress me most, I've interviewed famous people. I could tell you some famous people. And I kind of divide them into two categories. There's stars and servants. The stars are the ones that we put the spotlight on, we put on the covers of their magazines, the Bill Gates' people. And I've gotten to know these people, and I went in thinking, man, would I like to be like those guys? But the more I've gotten to know them, I really wouldn't want to be like those guys. Sneaky journalist, I've been in their medicine cabinets, I've seen how many pills it takes them to get through in a day. I know how many spouses they've been through. I know how much they pay for counseling. These, by and large, few exceptions, aren't happy people. They're not fulfilled people. Instead, I've spent most of my career, really, finding people that we would normally overlook. And I told you I wrote 3 books with Dr. Paul Brand. He's as brilliant a man as I've ever met. He was offered the head of orthopedics at Stanford, at UCLA, at Harvard, turned it all down. This brilliant man graduated from the best medical school in England, top of his class, who spent his entire life, working life, among the lowest people on the entire planet. I guarantee you that there is nobody lower on any social ladder than someone in the untouchable caste in India who has leprosy. That's as low as it goes. They're kicked out of their own family, they're kicked out of their own villages, their hands, their feet, their faces are falling apart. And here was this brilliant orthopedic surgeon who devoted his life to putting them back together. And I'm sure he would have won a Nobel Prize if he had stayed in the nice laboratories in England. But he didn't do that. He went to this godforsaken place in the middle of a desert in India because nobody wants to live next to a leprosarium. And as a journalist, I just have to tell you, I've never met a more fulfilled and grateful and balanced person in my life than this servant in this godforsaken place giving up. You know, the statement that Jesus made that's repeated in the Gospels more than any other statement, 6 times, goes like this. He says, you don't find your life by grabbing hold and seizing and accumulating. You find your life by giving it away in service to others. And I found that to be true. Not just as I guess I got to do that, but if you actually do it, you are the one who benefits. You are the one who is the better person. I remember interviewing a man named Millard. Millard was an entrepreneur. He was a millionaire practically by the time he got out of high school. He had this scam going where he paid the secretary to the principal, and she gave him, for a certain fee, she gave him the phone numbers and birthdays of everybody in the school. So he would call, he was in Alabama, he'd call Mrs. Smith. Mrs. Smith, we got this little tradition here. I understand Mary's birthday's coming up next Tuesday. Well, yeah, that's right. Well, for $5, we'll bake her a cake and we'll have everybody in the school sing happy birthday. What do you think? Would you like to donate $5? Well, what mother's going to turn that down? And he got out of high school. He's already rich. He becomes a lawyer, and he's driving along one day, and he notices that back in those days, the 1950s, people are on these old metal Ford tractors. They look so uncomfortable. They're bouncing up and down. So he invents a tractor cushion shaped like a tractor and becomes a millionaire. But his life is falling apart. And one day, he's getting a divorce. And one day, somebody says to him, an African-American taxi driver in New York City says, Sir, sorry, I've been overhearing what you say here, but you know what you need to do? You need to go down and see Clarence Jordan in Georgia. He'll straighten out your life. And Clarence Jordan was this radical Christian, lived on a commune, was blown up by the KKK numerous times. And Millard went down there and explained his whole situation, and Clarence Jordan said, well, sounds to me like you got entirely too much money. So why don't you go give away all your money, and then you come back and talk to me? He said, all of it. He said, isn't that what Jesus said to the rich man? Give it all away. Okay. So Millard did. He gave away $2.3 million. And he came back. Clarence said, you gave away all of it? Yes, sir. All of it? Yes, sir. Well, we need to find you a job, don't we? He said, what do you think makes God unhappy? And they well, disease, earthquake, all these things may God. What do you think? And finally they decided, you know,